Good morning, everyone. Hope you didn't have too hot a night and you're all refreshed this morning, or as much as possible. Thanks for joining our webinar. What we're going to do today is talk about joined up membership, education and CPD, what we believe the best way to run your membership and training programs from a systems point of view. So there's a number of people joining as we go, but we'll kick off straight away. The session should last around an hour, and we hope you enjoy it. So, some easy etiquette. So, we're recording the seminar. We'll circulate links to everyone that registered, even if they didn't join, so you'll get copies of that. Any questions throughout, please just use the chat box, type in any questions. We'll either pick them up in line or we'll pick them up at the end of the session, so they'll be covered either way. If we don't get to them, we will answer them individually after the session as well. And could you just make sure, if you're not already, that all your microphones are muted, because we much as we enjoy dogs and children, not in seminars, they don't go down so well. So with that, let's run through what the session's going to cover. So firstly, we're going to hear from my colleague Alan, and he's going to give us a set of scenarios that we find all of the time. What are the issues that are being faced by members, students, membership associations, staff, and every other stakeholder in the area. Then I'll cover two areas, what a good system looks like, and how to turn that good system into a really good system, a great system. And then we move over to a discussion with one of our customers, which is Lee from the Royal Town Planning Institute. And Lee's organisation, we wanted to involve Lee because they are on the journey between good and great. So it's not a complete system, it's not the complete sort of showpiece that everyone would aspire to, quite deliberately, because we want to show what the journey is and what you can do and how you can adapt as you go. And then obviously we'll round up any other questions and answers as we go. So with that, I'll hand over to Alan and he'll pick up for the first half of the presentation. Alan.
Great, thank you very much, Steve. Good morning, everybody. My name's Alan Reed. I'm an independent consultant working in the membership and education space. I've been doing that for coming up for 25 years, which is why I'm so old and gnarly looking. I have a specialist interest in education within membership, so I've worked with organisations like RIBA, CIPD, the Association for Project Management, dedicated awarding bodies like NEBOSH, organisations like the Royal Society of Medicine, and so on. So I'm really delighted to be talking about the trends in membership organisations that also tackle career development and education for their members. So I'm just going to kick off with that. So first of all, we did a survey where we talked to over 300 members and students about what was working well and what was working less well with their membership body. So essentially, we asked them, what does the organisation do well? Do you feel like you're getting value for the money that you spend with them? What do they do badly? What are the things that have your teeth grinding? And what are the major changes you would like to see coming down the line? So we got quite a lot of, obviously those kind of questions are deliberately designed to invite, let's hear it, let's hear the negativity. So we got quite a lot of that. On the positive side, we've got a description of some organisations that are responding to this negativity and these challenges, and there is a clear way out of these challenges that a lot of leading membership and educating bodies are doing. So we go through a little bit of a dip of negativity, and then we come up to the sunny uplands of, okay, well, here's what best practice looks like for a number of your peers and what they're doing about it. So one of the top level complaints, I always love a quote from the survey, was people saying variations of this It's like I'm dealing with different organizations for every little thing that I do with them. So when I'm dealing with them about membership, I get one set of stuff. When I'm dealing with them about CPD or education, I get other sets of stuff. And sometimes that materialized in things like different logons on the website, but clearly a lack of overview of the member as an individual or the student as an individual. So that's a really common complaint. And then the other side of it from the membership body, the educating body, is real frustration there that expectations are going up every year. There's a lot of frustration about the level of technology that's required to engage in a modern way as well. So expectations are going up, and students and members are increasingly frustrated. So I just want to cycle through some common complaints, and I wonder if you recognize any of these complaints that they could be targeted at your own organization. So one of them we've called it, "Who the hell are you anyway? What have you been up to all year?" So essentially what that materializes as is you do the member and the student does everything with you as a membership body all year. They attend your webinars, they attend your events, they buy training from you. They do, the great majority of their career development and CPD with you all year. They then go to your CPD portal, if you have such a thing, to some other way of updating CPD for you through at the end of the year, let's say, at the end of the cycle. And then, of course, it's completely empty. It's a blank slate, tabula rasa. No information known, despite the fact that they've done everything with you all year. They've even paid you for certain things that have direct CPD credit attached to them, and then you have to start all over from scratch and telling them about that, which it's not just the irritation that we get that it's okay, I have to type this stuff in again. It's, why did I bother if you don't know about it and you're not using it to manage your relationship with me? So the obvious conclusion for that is you really haven't got a clue who I am. And by the way, there's a general dissatisfaction around CPD, where people feel it's a bit of a paper mill or a pointless exercise, and sometimes it's seen as a money-making machine. So then another fairly common complaint is that the membership body has a little bit what's called a ticket inspector approach to CPD. In other words, members are expected to carry out their, whatever it is, 40 hours of activity a year. 95% of them are essentially ignored all year. They're told to do it, guidelines are set up, they're told that they can only maintain membership if they keep this stuff up. But then they're essentially ignored about all of that. A small number are audited, hounded to death every year. That's the bus inspector equivalence. You're expected to buy a ticket not because your ticket will be checked. It's because you might have someone come up to your seat and say, "Can I see your ticket, please?" So you're worried about getting audited. You're not getting any benefit from that. There's no understanding from the membership body, and the obvious conclusion that my membership body can't manage their own CPD scheme. They can't manage the information that would be generated if everyone told them what they were up to all year, or how they were keeping up with their CPD. So other complaints, largely around service and technology. These are really common. Over 60% of our respondents made complaints in this area. So first of all, dealing with separate organizations, we've had that. Just really disconnected as a property very often of people using separate systems for separate things. Endless charges with very little benefit. Of course, that's subjective. And it drives me crazy that there are some things that I can only do by phone and by email. It's a bit like being asked to go to the bank to get some cash out in your lunch break, and actually having to go into a branch instead of doing it the way that's convenient for you any time of the day. So lots and lots of repetitions of things are very disconnected and slow as a membership body dealing with career development and education. So essentially what we have is people talking about separate logins for the LMS and course bookings on examinations on the website, or separate sets of details. And by the way, if you're an organization that is asking people to identify themselves with some special number, whether it's a membership number or a student number of some sort, or a delegate number, just know that your members and students are cursing at you for demanding that, because it's something you might only need once a year. People change their devices all of the time, new laptop, new phone, and then you have to go hunting around for this thing that you're the only organization in the world that asks it. Why aren't you getting by on email address and password, like some of the most sensitive things that we all deal with around, you know, Outlook and Amazon and our own social media and so on. So then, of course, still paper driven in some cases, although that's getting rarer, and that's more a property of COVID than energetic change in some organizations. Still some stuff happening by post, so people having to wait days and sometimes weeks to get things by post. Slow process to get results, very difficult to get certificates and reprints. And then again, you know, that can often happen by post and letter as well, by post and paper. So then a fairly dissatisfied set of members, students, and delegates. So then we asked similar questions of the people who work for membership organizations and educating bodies with career development. So a lot of complaints from staff, and actually a lot of the time they're calling out for leadership from their own organization. So yes, we need specialized systems for everything. We need specialized systems for exams management, learning management, events, etc., etc. A lot of frustration around the market for tools. I specialize in this area, and I can agree that the number of tools available for education in particular has tripled in the last 5 years, and they haven't agreed on the language between the different suppliers. So if you try and get agreement on what a learning management system is, or what a student record system is, you'll get a dozen different definitions. So it's very frustrating, very difficult for membership and educating bodies. The result of all of these separate systems is that there's lots of complex manual interventions, lots of wasted staff time, lots of people having to hustle data between one system and another. And the obvious conclusion from that is it can't carry on like this. People can't manage the volume. They can't manage the volume of pretending to be joined up when they're really not joined up. So why is this still so hard? You know, this has been going on for, I'm sorry to sound so old, but it's been going on for over 20 years. And people are still using very disconnected systems for pretty much everything. Excuse me. And at the same time, members and stakeholders are demanding ever more personalized, relevant, targeted content and services. So one of the major things that we found is that it's not just a technology problem. There are technologies that allow you to do more in fewer systems. We're going to talk about that. A lot of the time it's cultural. People are very used to the way that they're working. Different departments within organizations insist on their separate specialized system, insist on keeping hold of their data, even when actually the cost of that in terms of separation and overhead is not justified by the complexity of what they're doing. So they have to learn about that. So the education director's view of the world is actually very different from the students' view of it, but it's the reality of what they're dealing with behind the scenes. So what we get is, of course, different tools that don't talk to each other, but all have a bit of the person in them, a bit of the student, a bit of the member. We have still some dependency on paper. Sometimes that's because of organizational obligations. The council insists on doing it in a certain way, and sometimes it's just because of they lack the online portals, they lack the tools to allow people to work in every area remotely. A common example is having to pass exam scripts from one examiner to another, and then eventually back to the student, and the whole thing takes months. No single view of the truth. And this is an actual quote. I've got bits of people all over the place. It sounds like a war zone, which just means massive overhead and difficulties. And they know, and organizations like yourselves, your peers know when you're providing a poor service, you know when it's there's a lot of wasted staff time and high risk. So that's the negativity to a large extent. On the positive side, there has been some really major shifts since about 2013, 2015. And in a couple of major areas. So the first of the major shifts is that just to recognize the problem, first of all, up until 2013, most systems only did one thing. So that was pretty common. So a world of software vendors that did everything from, optical character recognition only, and did, exams marking only, and did events management only. So it meant that you ended up with bits of people everywhere, in all of these different systems. And then that third bullet, you really can't put a website with joined up services to a person over this mess of disconnected systems that don't talk to each other. You can't present a unified face and services. The website can't write bits of the transaction to lots of different systems behind the scenes. So it leads to lots of complaints. And in response, really, what's happened in the supplier world and in the membership and education world, there's been the rise of modular solutions. There's been the rise of platform solutions, and what that's meant is platforms like Dynamics, Salesforce, CVCRM. They've been developed to do lots of things in one system, usually pretty well. So in the membership and education world, a solid kind of 8 out of 10 partner selections, technology partner selections, now choose Microsoft Dynamics. It's been the dominant partner. In the charity world, it's Salesforce is the dominant partner. So one of the reasons that Dynamics has risen has been because of organizations that specialize in yes membership, but also exams, training, CPD, learning management, individual career development. So tools and modules to do all of these things rather than lots of separate best of breed tools. So what we've seen is that even if organizations cannot reduce to one main back office system, they've been able to reduce to a lot fewer back office systems, maybe a main system and one specialized system in some area, which is an awful lot easier to tackle. So that's a big part of the solution and a really big change in the last 6-7 years. But what's also happened is that we've seen the rise of combined platform and website projects and suppliers who've responded to that. So it used to be that essentially there were website partners who only did websites, and there were CRM back office partners who only did the back office, and they were really strict in their separation up until about 2015 or so. And then it became clear that you can't do a successful project without the two parts of your front office and back office really being merged together as one. They're so tightly tied together now, it's hugely risky to try to do them separately. And the arguments between suppliers just got worse and worse. So what we've seen is that back office suppliers have essentially turned themselves into web agencies as well. So they've either acquired web companies or taken on web developers to be able to offer that single stop shop, either by replacing the entire website in some cases. That's probably the minority, but certainly taking over the integration themselves, taking over the self-service portal themselves. And that's meant that the projects can focus on the business needs instead of focusing on trying to tackle suppliers arguing with each other and both of them pointing at you in the middle. So another reason that that's changed, by the way, is that historically, again, up until about 2015 or so, this was the cycle of replacement. Essentially, every 5 or 6 years, 5 or 7 years maybe, membership organizations would go through this huge, massive upheaval where they had to replace things in order to get it to talk to the website, replace things to change the way that their business was changing. And what it meant was you would have a big project in years one and two, maybe some stability and benefits for a period of years, and then you do it all over again a few years later. And by the way, those big triangles represent sometimes up to 2 years of management distraction, risk, stress for everybody. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who've left their organization because of the awfulness of their projects. So that's changed a lot as well in the last 7 years. So this model here is now a lot more common. Essentially, with a more modular approach, there's still that big bump at the beginning where everyone's can be stressed out of their minds, although with more experienced suppliers that's going down as well. But what then happens is that you're adapting to your forever home. Instead of going through a massive upheaval a few years down the pike, what you're then doing is it's a constant program of improvement. And essentially, you can take on a module to do something that you would have had to replace an entire system to do in the past. So it's a gradual expansion to become, the fewest possible systems and achieve a single view of the truth and a single place where you can invest and use to drive your business forward. So that's caused a lot of improvements in the last few years. That's a fairly common quote as well. So because the market is changing, people don't know where to invest, so that it's not a write-off in a few years' time. So what I'd like to do, if I may, is just finish with a survey before I hand over to some case studies of how some who are doing it really well, and some encouraging news from your peers in the sector. So if I could just ask my colleague to put up this survey on screen, and we're asking which of these challenges you recognise for you. It's an anonymous survey. Which of these challenges you recognise for you. So if we can get the survey up on the screen, and then if you could please put your own responses to it, and then we'll share the results. I'll just give it a few more seconds while people are responding. Great, and then the countdown clock, but we'll 5 seconds, and fantastic. All right, well, if we can close the survey, then please. And then if we just publish the results, you'll see the results in the same way in your chat, and then we can see actually what I'm seeing on here. And Steve, I'll invite your comments when you come on as well. That actually the great majority of people, we've got over a quarter of you having real trouble being personalized and relevant. The majority are finding trouble with joined up CPD and providing modernized services as well. So you're a representative audience in the sector. So great. I'd just like to hand over to Steve. I'd also like to say, can I invite people to use the chat function to put your own questions in. We've got a Q&A panel at the end. So any questions relating to your own project, please drop them into the chat and we'll tackle them at the end at the end of this little session here in about 20 minutes. So Steve, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back visible. So yeah, I mean, the interesting results from the survey from my point of view is it's generally actually quite evenly spread across the categories. So what seems to be the case now is previously single view was a great driver for many years. That seems to largely have been fixed or less of a requirement. Sorry, not less of a requirement, less of an obstacle now. But it's the personalization that obviously came out slightly larger, and particularly the joined up integration between CPD, membership, and training and so on, which is what this is about. So good, we're all in the right area. So if we move to the next section now. So Alan's outlined a lot of the feedback we get in organizations that we talk to and our own customer base. I'm going to pick up some examples of where solutions, what good solutions look like and where they can be extended to become great solutions. So moving on, if we look at some aspects of typical implementation. So again, this is building what Alan said, but there are various functional areas, and rather than build them up, I'll put them all up there. But 5 main pillars of a typical membership organization that does training. So there's obviously the events and the training provision, so the management of delegates, the marketing of those events, and then the provisioning of those examinations, qualifications, education sessions or events. There's obviously the managing of membership, and the ability therefore to make particular types of training or events available to particular types of membership, maybe on grade or longevity or whatever. So they're right into the personalization area, which of course you need integration for. And then there's making CPD a benefit. So how do you manage that and make it easy to manage and provision, and for your members to self-serve around that as well, rather than it appearing as an imposition, which is a lot of the feedback we get. So typically these are provided by separate systems. They've typically evolved over time. Quite often they happen because one department wants to go out and get something, and then another department goes out and gets something else, and there's not an overall strategy. So you can end up with systems that are separate and in some cases not integrated, or not integrated effectively either. So you then end up in that area of pain that we were talking about before. So that's what we often find when we're talking to organizations that are looking for a new strategy. The way that we try and address that is to create a platform. So we work with Dynamics, as we've mentioned, but there are other platforms are available. But essentially, we drive for systems rationalization, as few systems as possible, because if you've got the right platform, it should be able to do a lot of the functionality that you need without the need to go out and buy specialist applications, but we'll cover when that's appropriate in a minute. But the point is here, as many of your stakeholders in one place, no matter who they are, members, fellows, trainees, students, non-members, because you want to culture those into members. But then once you've got one platform, you can have your business rules managing the data from one place. You can have one payment system interface. You can have one credit card and finance system interface, and so on. So it's about getting a platform, avoiding data manipulation, avoiding manual workarounds, and having great analysis overall, which addresses all of those points that were in the survey. So that's what we aim at. And these don't have to be done as a one-off. They can evolve into these as well, and we've got ways of doing that. So this isn't a big 2-year disruption. This can be an evolution point by point to cover each of those 5 areas I talked about just now: CPD, training, education, events, membership, and so on. So that's what we believe good looks like. That's the initial strategy that we work with to drive towards for our customers. So where do we find, or what do we find in the reality? Well, quite often we find that organizations say, well, what we want an integrated platform, which is great, because that's what we've just said that people should want. But what we find is that in practice, sometimes that doesn't happen. So particularly we find a desire or a fact that there's a separate student record system or learning management system or CPD management system. And in some cases, that's exactly the right thing to do, but only in some cases. So typical questions: do I need a separate students record system? So we don't find this in lots of membership associations, but we do find it in a reasonable enough number. And the answer, so students record systems are really all about managing student intake, delegate intake, the training provision, the management of all of their activity around it. And our answer is, well, you're going for a membership CRM, which is meant to hold stakeholders and all of their activities, so you can help manage and drive them down particular member journeys. Why would you want a separate parallel system doing some of that for those that are taking particular types of course? So it's worth thinking about. And some of the key requirements we think for when a student's record system is relevant is if you've got a really complex course structure. And we'll be touching upon this in a little bit, but it's very rare that we find that course structures are sufficiently complex and interdependent that you need a separate system that you can't handle in the good Dynamics platform. Therefore, you don't need separate systems, you don't need integration, you don't need double expense, and you don't need to keep them communicating throughout their lives. So a good membership CRM system should be able to handle almost all of the student records you need, unless you've got an extremely unusual situation. So point of that, as we said before, system rationalization is that all of the data and therefore all of your business process rules can be managed in one place. The next is, do I need a separate learning management system? So this is much more common, particularly now around the digital provision of learning management. So the answer is, well, yeah, but quite often, no. It'll be less often than you might think you need. So again, what are the attributes? So if you do a lot of assessments and exams, then clearly LMS is crucial. But if you're just running general training, then I would consider, alternatives than buying a separate LMS. The other part that plays roles, again, complex course structure with interdependencies. So again, there's an overlap there with the student record system, but this is about provisioning. Student record is about analysing and monitoring. But if there's a lot of interaction with the trainer, then again, an LMS system with all of that built-in stuff to enable you to start courses, stop courses, start in the middle of sessions, interact, and so on, can be really helpful. And also the ongoing after course engagement side. So what do you do as follow-up? What does the student need as follow-up? Access to course collateral, and so on. So LMSs certainly have much more of a place in membership associations, but than student record systems. But they're not. We see a number of situations where they've been bought because, well, other people have got them, haven't they? Where those organisations didn't actually need that additional spend. They could have done it through their membership CRM. Next question. So, do I need a separate CPD system? For many years, this was always separate, and I think that created, again, its own momentum of, well, they've got one, so we need one. The answer is, we don't believe you do in almost all cases. We built an app called Smart CPD 7-8 years ago, and it's totally integrated into our events and our training, and points get awarded subject to what you've allocated to those different training, and it manages the drive towards you're 30% through your CPD, but we're 80% through your year. What are you going to do about it? So you can help your members manage themselves just by sensible messaging and personalization. But again, CPD can become more complex. So if you've got if you've got a mentor and mentee management, and we see this in a lot of institutes, and we see it in some more generic membership associations, then again, CPD or a separate CPD can be very useful to manage that. Again, a good platform can do some of that mentor-mentee management. I mean, essentially, you're asking for mentors to say what they're good at mentoring, mentees to say what they're looking for, and then you get a fuzzy matching as like a dating agency, but you need to tie the CPD points and measurement into that process, and it's obviously a lot more fluid than a whole set of courses, which is why it needs good focus. And again, individual learning management planning. So we'll look at that in one of the examples I'm going to come to in a minute. So if we look at, in fact, what we'll do is we've got our second survey of the day. So this one's different from the last. It's single answer rather than multiple answers. So choose one of the radio buttons. But what do you feel you've currently got? Is it integrated with everything doing what you need, or are you going that way but just trying to get it working now, or is it disconnected and you don't have systems that connect in terms of sharing the data? So, Bastian, if you'd like to publish that would be good, and then we'll have a look at what the results are for that. So we'll give it just a few more seconds. They're still coming through, so I'll just wait a bit more. Sorry, while the suspense builds.
Yeah.
Okay, Bastian, do you want to publish the results for that? So what we're seeing is the option. So for, I'm surprised that actually, the option 1, which is it's doing a good job for us, is as low as 8%. I would have thought it's higher than that, but that shows again this is clearly an issue. It's even more of an issue than we suspected it was across this particular audience. But a lot of you are on the journey to try and fix it, but 42% trying to, but struggling to get that working. So be interesting to hear some of the feedback on that in the Q&A. If any of you want to submit, where the issues are, we can talk about how we might try and get through them, or maybe we'll pick up some of those issues in the interview with Lee. And in terms of disconnected systems, 34%. So new systems at 42% and disconnected systems at 34%. Really high. It's from our point of view, something we can definitely address, but it's a lot more than I was expected it would be. Alan, I don't know if you've got any comments on that I haven't covered.
Just really briefly, the people with relatively modern systems that is not quite there yet or not working very well for them is really high. And that could be a property again of disconnected things, that even though it's been bought relatively recently, they've bought lots of disconnected things, and actually integrating is just as hard as implementing, is what we tend to find.
Okay, so moving on, how do we get from a good platform to what has the makings of a great system? So it's raising the game for your staff, for your members, bringing them a much closer, engaged experience. And a lot of that really is around personalization and automated member journeys, or at least guided member journeys, system guided member journeys that your staff can then help accelerate. So and that goes back to some of the original first survey responses that we got about personalization. So the platform's the first step. The personalization can then build upon that because you've got your data and your processes in one place. So we'll give some examples of some of our customers from the members' point of view. So what can they do on their websites and portals? Some of them are websites we're provided, others are websites provided by third parties. We're perfectly able to integrate our dynamic solutions to any existing websites or new websites, or we can provide the whole thing. But as I say, they're all connected to our Smart Membership app within Dynamics. So whole point, platform's there, personalization rules are driven in one place from Smart Membership, but that means they can work across any channel, not just your website, but on mobile apps, via social media, even email obviously, but even by letter for those that still do mail as well, because a number of members prefer that. The point is, one set of rules can be personalized by the member's preference for which communication channels they need, and then your journeys should be able to deal with the right channel with the right message for that particular member. So the first example is the Royal Statistical Society, which is always enjoyable to say in any presentation if you've got your teeth in. So this is just their classics sort of front end website, but you can see it's got a number of different tags here where people can start to say, well, these are the things I'm interested in. So you can personalize what members, and depending on the technology you're using, non-members see as a initial screen. And you might wonder how non-members can do it without signing in, but you can do that via cookies, and then the system can learn about them and what they have been dwelling on, what pages they've been going to, and then start to feed them more relevant information on that particular area. But if you click into the sign in, then you start to get to a particular, or you get to your own page. So here's an example, and you can, members can essentially just see what they need about events, particular news. They can edit their own profile, they can change their tagging, so they'll get different personalization. So there's a lot of control directly within the portal, and it means that the individual members can start to drive what they consume from you more and more. So tagging is very flexible, and your member journeys and intelligence within your system can help drive that even better. So an example here, this lady is qualified as a fellow. She's now able to apply for what RSS calls GradStat or CStat, graduate status also, or in fact, I've forgotten what CStat means. But as that message comes up, because she's eligible, so do the buttons to apply come up as well. So you can start to drive interaction in that way and engagement that adds value and adds service. Another example is the College of Optometrists. So again, front screen, generic. These are the things that we want you to know as a member or non-member, as a visitor. But if you want to sign in, then you start to get to, and again, it's quite similar to the previous slide, but again, you can see there's a different type of message here. So this is triggered by the finance system knowing that a membership fee is outstanding, or maybe it's a training fee, a certification fee, it could be an event fee, there could be a whole range of different things. So this is saying, look, pay the outstanding fees now, please, as a message. And quite easily this can be tailored, and it can start to even go as far as restricting access. So again, lot of control over what you do. And again, everything else is personalized, so you can make sure people see the courses or events that are useful for them. So as you can see here, this is booking on an event. It shows them the journey through, and it only shows them what's relevant to their particular grade or membership type and so on. And pricing can be dependent on that as well. So all tailorable, all personalized, depending on the data in your platform, but driven out of that Dynamics platform. This isn't using a student record system or an LMS or separate CPD. And all of that appears in Dynamics, so everyone that's registered, you can see what they're paying, what they've got, any discounts and so on. It's all directly in there. Third example is the Institute of Leadership and Management. So this is an example of a website we didn't build, but I particularly like it. It's got some nice touches in it. So immediately it's saying, look, join us anyway. It's free. You'll be able to use some of our services and products. And where that takes you is to a screen that you can have as a member or as a non-member. But you can see there's a whole range of different tools here, and two we'll look at is My Leadership and My Pathway. So very quickly, this is a separate system. This is specifically for very complex and powerful learning management and CPD, but it's called My Leadership, and there are 49 training blocks that that the Institute of Leadership and Management provide. Full members can get to all of them. They can work their way through them in a particular order because they're all interlinked with interdependencies. And you can say, right, here I want all components. But if you're a non-member or not a full member, or you're a corporate member, you can get to things called short courses or pathways, which takes you a particular route through these 49 blocks. And there are a whole range of different pathways and programs here, but one example here is Road to Resolution. If you do it, you get a certification, and you can see it's immediately cut through the lists of all of the different options here into specific options which say, well, just work your way through these. When you get to the end of this, you get a particular certification. That might then mean that you decide to join us as a full member, and then when you work through all of these, then that can reflect on your membership status. You can go up and up and up our grades and certification programs. So it's very powerful, very visual, takes you to the courses, runs the courses, knows you've passed them, and then does CPD, points awarding and certification after that. And the final slide, which I'm not going to talk through, is RTPI, again built by a third party, but you can see it's very certification focused, very training and education focused. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Lee and to Alan to talk more about RTPI and where they are in their membership journey.
Great, thank you very much, Steve. That's fantastic. So there is some good news, that some are doing it really well. Lee, can I welcome you to speaking at the webinar? How are you this morning?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I'm having a bit of issue with my camera, unfortunately. So
all right. Well, we've got a picture of you. So yes, we can manage without it if we have to. So just really briefly, do you mind just a couple of words about what RTPI do and what the offering is of RTPI to your members and learners, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the RTPI is the foremost professional body for the planning industry and sector. So we have around 27,000 members worldwide. We've got members in over 100. We've got members all over the world, sorry, and around sort of 3/4, I suppose, share of the plan is certainly in the UK, which is obviously something that as an industry we want to grow. And what we do is we provide the means by which people that are either in the planning industry already or are studying to be in the planning industry, for them to progress through their professions. So obviously join the institute and then normally work towards the ultimate goal of becoming a chartered town planner.
Fantastic. And it's amazing that there are 27,000 town planners. Well, that's only your membership, and then there's you've got 3/4 of the planners in your membership. So can you tell us a little bit about what you offer them in terms of their training, career development? You cover a lot of ground. You've got things like the E-Academy, and so perhaps if you put it in the context of how you would take somebody from a student who wants to enter into the industry, and then how you help them along the way, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have we start even a little bit before that. So we do have programs where we go into schools, etc., to sort of start at that base level of letting young people know what planning is and how you can become a planner and what that means as a career, etc. And then there's obviously a very heavy focus on helping students that are studying in the courses that are relevant to the planning industry to understand their journey with the institute. So what we tend to do is you'll find a typical member will normally join as a student member while they're studying. We'll support them with guidance and material that we publish from the various different departments of the RTPI. Normally when they graduate, we then help them along their career progression to become what we call a licentiate member, which is sort of the membership class that they normally stay in the early stages of their career. And that's where our sort of education, training and professional development team really help to kind of support training courses that help them when they're starting out in their career. Obviously things like maintaining good PDP records for themselves, so allowing licensed members to kind of take ownership of their career progression in the early stages. And as that moves along, they then hopefully build up the experience, etc., that they need to apply to become normally, as I say, a chartered town planner, which is then the next step on that journey. And then once they become a chartered town planner, the support doesn't really stop. So we obviously have things such as the yearly CPD audit that we do, which you've mentioned earlier in the webinar. But we also have a focus on the idea of the members as much as possible kind of owning their own career progression. So that's where things like the e-Academy or RTPI Learn platform kind of kicks in as well.
And then that all sounds like a lot of support for education and ongoing career development and membership. Could you tell us a little bit about the relationship between membership, because you're a membership body, and the education offerings that you have, and what people have to do in order to remain in membership? And you mentioned PDP, which I guess is a personal development plan. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that, please?
Yes, certainly. So I mean, we obviously, as many, I'm sure, people on the webinar today, their institutes will have kind of required CPD hours that members will have to maintain. But what we also require as part of the process of achieving the corporate grades of membership, so things like chartership, etc., members are required to maintain regularly updated PDPs. So that's the big encouragement with that from a membership and then professional development kind of area is supporting our members to take ownership of their own career progression. So maintaining a PDP where they're really thinking about where their career is going and where they want it to go, and what they require, both on a personal level, so from their own personal goals, but also then making sure that they hit the points that are required in order for them to apply and hopefully be successful in becoming a chartered member.
Great. And so all of those different educational and career development offerings. So going back to RTPI then, and how you've gone about it, as Steve mentioned, you're along the journey. You're probably representing a lot of your fellow delegates. So you started some years ago with your CRM project to your Dynamics project to get a single view of the truth. So what were you trying to solve with that? And just really briefly, how do you feel that project went?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main goal of going on this sort of digital transformation or sort of journey that the Institute's gone on is really moving away from systems that we had previously that weren't connected, that didn't speak to each other. I'm not even sure if I would call our previous system a CRM. It was really a kind of database that was effectively just a repository for data that was used only by a couple of departments at the RTPI, and didn't really speak to our website in any real way, and so offered very limited reporting capabilities, etc. So the Institute took the decision that we needed to move away from that and move to a CRM, and so we went through with Smart Impact the implementation of a CRM initially, and then followed up with that around a year later with a complete update to our website, with much more integration with our CRM. And as we then, as well as that, last year went through the process of upgrading from our original version of Dynamics, which was 2016, to the current Dynamics 365 platform, which is what we now use. And that's really opened the doors for us now in terms of from 2022 onwards, really starting to develop the system, and in order for it to provide multiple departments the platforms that they need to achieve their goals.
And so that's more of an example of what we were talking about earlier, actually, of instead of a big upheaval after 5 or 6 years, would you describe it as more like an upgrade or more like a replacement? Was it more like a stressful replacement?
It was very much an upgrade. It was a surprisingly seamless upgrade, if I'm honest with you, with the support of Smart Impact. So it was relatively painless. I think the project was maybe 3 months to upgrade from the old version to the new version. And like I say, that I kind of can't really stress the benefits of moving to Dynamics 365 and what that's now starting to do for us. It was absolutely worth going through that kind of three-month period of upgrading to the new version of Dynamics, but it's really opened some doors for us now.
Great, thank you. I've just got one more question for you because I want, and I'm going to ask you to stay on the panel because we've got a Q&A, some Q&A questions I want to tackle.
Yeah.
So Lee, RTPI tackled the your CRM, but you did the CPD and eLearn projects separately rather than together. So what was the thinking there? Why do them separately? Why not do them at the same time and you know, try and get it all in a big bang?
I think it's probably something that people on the webinar will find fairly common, which is kind of, it's difficult sometimes for people, so colleagues, to understand what they really want or need from these systems. And so when we were going through the initial CRM implementation, it's sometimes hard to visualize what these systems can do, particularly if you've never gone through a CRM implementation or even potentially used a CRM in the past. So what we did as an institute at the time is we kept the learning platform separate and did some very basic integration. So you can log into our e-learning platform using the same credentials that you would use to log into the RTPI website as a member. But that's kind of where the integration at the moment stops. And that's obviously a future thing that we're now looking to change.
Very much a journey. I don't know. And we hear this all the time. People don't know what they don't know, so they don't know what's out in the world. They don't know what others are doing. So the safer thing is not to do the big bang. But Lee, thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask you to, if you don't mind, just stay on the panel for the Q&A session, because we've got some really good Q&A questions that have dropped in. I'm going to tackle one, first of all, a point that we made earlier on the webinar. So Adam Richardson has asked, with reference to unique reference number, what if you have emails as a central login, but the member moves to another company with a separate email address? What point of truth would you then use for logins? So I guess, Steve, I've got my own views on this, but I'll just invite your comments as well. It's a universal problem. So yes, what are your views on that?
Well, I think the initial point's a good one. That you know, myself, I can never remember all the different membership numbers I've got, and equally I do. I still use some very old email addresses as a login because I can remember them. For organisations that I'm a member of when I've changed organisations. So what you find is that you can have a separate sign-in. So your communication email should always be up to date. You should make sure that that's the thing that the organisation can communicate with you. But if you're using a different sign-in code, that could be a reference number which will be difficult to forget. It could be an email address or a passcode, your own ID, that could be much easier to get to remember. So my view is try to avoid numbers, try to allow people to use something memorable, and that could be any code, an email address, but use that as a separate, but have your communication email address as a separate thing.
And then just briefly, we're all dealing with hundreds of organizations online, and we're using our email address. They've all solved it. And in the main, the way they can solve it is that the individual can have multiple email addresses attached to their record. And of course, you can change your own email address online as you need to. There's another question that came up that was related to the content that we were talking about. And it might relate to what you're talking about with ILM, Steve. Jane Shears has asked, we have members and non-members attending CPD events. Do we have any top tips about how we manage different categories of attendees? And of course, the ILM are doing that now. So Steve, any comments from you?
Well, actually, I answered that in the chat, and I said that ILM are doing that now. So, I mean, the point, Jane, is if you're willing, happy to have a more detailed call on our chat or so about your particular requirements, because I think it's a great marketing tool to start finding possible new members. But I don't know your particular situation or what your systems can currently do. I would certainly think about being able to categorize and personalize your follow-ups, but you really would want to do that systematically, I suspect. So if you want to reach out to me, very happy to talk to you about it.
And I'll just do one more question, although, and we'll overrun by 60 seconds. This one's for you, Lee, because you're living it. The most difficult thing, this is from Anne Welsh, the most difficult thing is knowing what you need in the first place. You're asked what you need by system designers, and afterwards, when you realize what you actually need, it's all charged extra as development cost. So Lee, you've lived that. Can we just get your view of maybe how you wished you'd done it, or how you would do it again in another life?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest challenge of any kind of CRM implementation or any kind of technological implementation. It's difficult really for like I say, for colleagues in particular, will get asked by developers, what do you want? And the answer would normally be, well, just whatever we've currently got. But actually when they start using the system and they start to get a kind of 360-degree view of their members or their customers, etc., it unlocks more of what they actually now need and require, and that's the difficulty. So I think what we would probably have done a bit more is maybe trying to speak to a couple more companies, smart impact clients, etc., that are using these kind of platforms to better understand what is possible, so that educate, that kind of like learning internally with colleagues is there. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a one-stop answer, unfortunately, for that.
Yes.
It also helps if you've got colleagues within the institute that have been through CRM implementations previously, because they can hopefully support colleagues in understanding what can be achieved. And it's about trying to draw up I would say, a wish list. How do you really want those systems to work? Then let the developers work out what they can and can't achieve within your budgets and resource, etc.
Great, thank you. And so great. What we'll do is we'll answer every question that's come through in the chat, because there's some really good ones we haven't got time to cover. We'll answer them in the follow-up that we send, along with the slide deck and along with the recording. Steve, just 30 seconds on something I think Smart Impact have done recently.
Yeah, we built a tool that enables any organisation to basically analyse their current system. So rather like the surveys we just showed you, it goes into more depth, but discusses system support, data integration, staff adoption, various other aspects. So it's a health check. It's available on that link there, which we'll send out in a follow-up email anyway. But you go through, it takes less than 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then you get a tailored report at the end of it saying, look, I'd focus on this, or I wouldn't worry about that, or this seems to be an issue for you. So it's useful, and it's a good guide of the areas of priority that we think you should be focusing on. So I'd encourage you all to do that. It's completely free. It's non-invasive, so use that. Second is, we run these events every month, apart from we're taking a break in summer, but the next one is in September, and they run through till Christmas. So please keep an eye on the events page, and you'll see the next one is about CRM and CMS. Should I approach both at the same time, or should I keep them separate? And then there are various other subjects we're running through October and November. So please look at those, sign up for those if you want to. And apart from that, thanks very much. We hope that was very helpful for you. Hope you're not too hot already in the morning. But if there are any particular questions that you'd like to follow up on, by all means, you've all got my email address. Just come back to me, and we're happy to answer specifically. Those questions we've got in the chat, we'll follow up anyway. So you'll see a few emails from us next, recordings of this event, and a copy of the slides, the health check, and some answers to the questions we've been asked thus far. So with that, I'd like to bring this to a close. Thanks very much for attending. We hope it was helpful for you, and thanks for all of your efforts. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lee, as well, for taking part in the interview. Thanks, everybody.